SJ Child Show is back for its 13th season. Join Sarah Bradford and the SJ Child Show team as they explore the world of autism and share stories of hope and inspiration. This season, we're excited to bring you more autism summits featuring experts and advocates from around the world. Go to sjchilds.org to donate and to get more information. Congratulations on 2024's 20,000 downloads and 300 episodes. Well, hello. We are back with another fantastic episode. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. And I'm happy to bring to you Dr. Theodore Henderson. And where are you coming from today, Dr. Theo, Dr. Henderson? Which one?
Denver, Colorado.
Oh, wonderful. I'm your neighbor in Salt Lake City.
There you go.
Yeah, that's great. We're having a really nice summer. I mean, it's a little hot as always, but having a pretty nice summer as far as it goes. I'm excited to talk to you today. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an introduction and let the audience know a little bit about yourself and what brought you here.
All right. Well, briefly, I'm a PhD in neurobiology first, and then not first, but it guides my life. So I'm a brain doc from the outset. And I'm an MD. I studied radiology and then I settled into psychiatry. And I also did a residency fellowship in child psychiatry. So in my child psychiatry fellowship, I became fascinated by the world of autism and began working with the JFK Center at the University of Colorado. I actually did a research fellowship for several months there. And autism has been a part of my practice since then. I'm on the advisory board of U.S. Autism Association, and I've worked with, greats like Dr. Larry Kaplan and several others, and brought to them neuroimaging and also sort of more holistic psychiatry, which has sort of been my bent. Over the past 15 years, I've moved away from medicine because I'm frustrated by medications and side effects, and moved towards more neuroplasticity-based treatments, more natural treatments. And, for example, the work we'll be talking about today involves infrared light, and there's nothing more natural than light. I think we're going to get into some very interesting things here.
I love this conversation, and it really is interesting. And a lot of people actually won't know this. Yay, new information for my listeners, which is exciting after 300 episodes, right? But this really ties into my life because I'm actually a former massage therapist, and there's just certain things that you learn when you are working with bodies and all types of things, whether it is actually physical or neurological, and the effects that come from working, with people. And I think that it leading into my experience as well, learning more and, this expansive journey I'm on with my entire autistic family and to really identify and give a new perception of what each brain. I would love that if we could look at it that way rather than this idea that there's these types that have to be labeled and looked at. I would love to be in the kind of the community where everyone is honored that they're a different type of human and unique person, and their brain is different than everybody else's in the room. So I think that is kind of like where I get excited personally and passionate about what we're going to talk about today. And but back to that massage therapist is that he was also did kinesiology and infrared. And so just I've had experience and I've seen the effects that these type of more holistic practices can help with one's healing processes. So, yeah, explain to our audience a little bit more about that kind of exact practice or modality and how it ties in, if you will.
Okay. Well, I'm going to geek out here.
I
So,
love it. Please do.
all right. So, certain wavelengths of infrared light, if they can reach the mitochondria, the organelles within the cells that make energy, are able to activate those mitochondria. We're going to leave it at that. There's lots of detail in there, but just it activates the mitochondria. And that does two things. One, it makes more energy. And number two, the mitochondria sends signals down to the chromosomes and turn on really important genes. For example, one of the genes that's activated is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF for short. Now, BDNF is the growth factor that drives neuroplasticity in the adult brain. Now, it just so happens that my postdoctoral research while I was a medical student and resident was on BDNF. So I understand BDNF very, very well. And when I first came into this field of infrared light, I was thinking, okay, this is sort of nonsense. How's light going to get through the scalp and the skull and into the brain? I mean, really, guys, what's going on here? But when I read a study out of Harvard that said, look, we show that we're turning on BDNF in the brains of mice with infrared light, and it's leading to brain repair, I was all in. And I said, okay, we got to figure out how to make this work in humans. So we went into the research lab and literally figured out how to, size it up from what worked in a mouse in a research lab at Harvard to something that worked on people. And that was back in 2013. We started treating patients in 2013, 2014 who had traumatic brain injuries. And a lot of these patients, we had brain scan data on them. So they had a SPECT scan, a functional brain scan at baseline. We treated them. We repeated the SPECT scan, and lo and behold, their brains looked better.
Wow.
Not only did their brains look better, but they clinically were better. Their depression was gone, their anxiety was gone, their cognitive problems were gone, their headaches were gone, their irritability was gone. It's like, wow, pretty cool stuff. So we published all that in 2015. Now, let's get back to those mitochondria for a second. The mitochondria also send signals that activate anti-inflammatory proteins. And it also sends signals that that bring stem cells out of hibernation and makes them turn into neurons and get into the game, so to speak. So this is a very, very powerful technique. And I'll add more in a little bit. When we started working with folks, treating folks directly with infrared light, we're using enough power to get through the scalp and skull. So we are directly treating the neurons in the brain. There's lots of these devices out there that use low power light. They're half-watt LEDs. You could buy them for a couple $1,000 off Amazon or from Vilight, or spend $6,000 for a helmet. The problem is half a watt doesn't even get through human skin. So you're treating the skin. Now that does something, but it's not treating the brain.
Wow.
Okay, so that's kind of a basic primer in infrared light and how it activates brain healing.
How can we find it in nature? Is that a possibility?
Well, yeah, understand that, we're delivering, 13, 14 watts of infrared light to the scalp. That would give you a heck of a sunburn if you were getting that on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
There is infrared light in the sun. So getting out in nature and getting infrared light on your skin, it does something.
Yeah.
The skin does something. And I can get into that at some point if you're interested. But
I love that.
Yeah, so, getting kids out away from the screens, for crying out loud, and into the sunshine is really, really good for them.
Absolutely. I can attest for that for myself this year. I've been out gardening and planting more than ever. And I think this year I just turned 49 and I've ran through the sprinklers more than I have in a decade. So I love it, right? Whatever we find to keep ourselves young. But no, I agree. There's a lot of even small things that I've noticed that have Im- increased as far as like energy and mobility, and just as far as I think I'm getting out so much that it's changed the being in for so many years, and in my office, in my computer room, and doing those things. But yeah, I think that it's so important that we get our kids out there too. And let's talk about, because I think that there's a little bit of like maybe a not even a stigma, but a disbelief even in brain scanning. And I think I that's how, I mean, I had mine done. I had a QEEG and I had mine done through that process. So I think that it worked for me. I mean, it gave me the information that resonated, that felt right, that made sense, that answered years of questions or problems or resistance that I may have had to myself, that I could embrace and say, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly what that means and why. So for me, it was just, it was so powerful.
Yeah. So you want me to talk about functional brain scans?
I want you to talk about brain scans.
Just want to be clear. So I got involved in functional brain scans about 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago now. And my initial reason for getting involved is, I went and listened to Daniel Amen,
yeah,
kind of the name you think of when you think of SPECT scans. And I went up to him after the talk and I said, you might be right, but you can't prove any of what you just said. You've not done the research. And so the opportunity came for me to get involved with a company that was doing SPECT scans in Denver. And, again, I'm a neurobiologist. I trained in neurobiology. I used to teach brain anatomy to medical students year after year after year. I know what does what, and my thesis, my PhD work was on structure-function relationships. So, in other words, every part of our brain has a particular assignment, and it's structurally refined to do that assignment very, very well. So you can't take motor cortex and expect it to work in the visual cortex. They're different. Anyways, so I started working in that field, and I started really getting an understanding of the science of SPECT scans and science of nuclear medicine. And we started then doing, taking large cohort studies. So hundreds of patients with ADHD or hundreds of patients with traumatic brain injury. And what do you see? So in fact, I published probably on the order of 20 papers now on SPECT scans. And the last pair of papers that we did, well, actually, let's back up a sec. So the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, came out about 7 years ago with a statement. There's no use in psychiatry for neuroimaging. There's no reason to do neuroimaging in psychiatry. Now, when you read that paper, it was really about functional MRI. It was not about SPECT scans. But everyone assumed it was about SPECT scans. But really, when you read the paper, it's not. So we, in fact, wrote 3 separate papers rebutting that premise, specifically on SPECT scans. And I'll give you just one example. So here's a young man, and he presents to a psychologist here in Colorado. And they determined after spending some time with him that he had bipolar disorder. And that was the cause of his problems, that he was bipolar disorder and maybe he had a personality disorder. And then, they sent him to me to do a SPECT scan. So he got a SPECT scan back. And the the scan of bipolar disorder is very specific. And in fact, I published a paper with my Canadian colleagues of a family where everybody had bipolar and everybody had gotten a SPECT scan, and they all look exactly alike. So there's a phenotype, there's a marker for bipolar disorder in SPECT scans. This kid did not have that. In fact, this kid looks like his brain was under attack. And I said, this is an infected brain. And so I did some further digging, and it turns out this kid had Lyme disease.
Wow.
And when we treated his Lyme disease, all of his problems went away. Like that.
Amazing.
I mean, he had been diagnosed with a disorder that has a lifetime consequence. Bipolar disorder, you're on lithium or Depakote or an antipsychotic for the rest of your life.
My goodness.
And now he's medication free, you know?
Never needed it in the first place. Yep. Absolutely.
And you know, and because of that paper, I had 3 or 4 more people called me up and say, I kind of wonder if my son might have bipolar or might have Lyme disease. And sure enough, you know, we found a lot of these misdiagnosed psychiatric cases. My own daughter contracted Lyme disease, and she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder by the docs in Chicago. They didn't do anything about, she had relapsing fevers every 6 weeks. But, let's not look at that. That's, I don't know what that is. We're not going to pay attention to that. You know?
Weird. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Functional brain scans, and this is Daniel Amen's line. And you know, Daniel Amen and I have published papers together. We've worked together on big projects. And one of the things he says that I think is spot on, he says, SPECT scans help you ask better questions. They don't give you the answers. They help you ask better questions.
Yeah.
So I don't do a SPECT scan on everybody who walks in the room. I do them on the ones that I can't figure out, or the ones that are not responding the way they're supposed to. That's when you need a SPECT scan to help clarify the diagnosis and the situation. Now, one of the things that's interesting, I smirked when you mentioned SPECT or scans, because in the state of Colorado currently, and this, you know, if there's a listener out there who happens to be a journalist or happens to be a philanthropist or a litigator, in the state of Colorado, you cannot get a SPECT scan done. Period.
Really?
The reason is that one radiology group controls the authorized user position for all of the hospitals outside of the University of Colorado. And that one radiology group has decided we're not going to allow SPECT scans. And so, you know, the hospital I had been working with for years suddenly says, we can't do SPECT scans because the radiologist refuses to do them. I requested a meeting with this radiologist. He refused. I sent him our definitive papers on SPECT scans and traumatic brain injury, which have been recognized by Discover magazine as some of the top work in that particular year, 2019. He refused to read them.
Why wouldn't you want more information? That's baffling to me.
Politics. So now here's the good news. Just today, the Society of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging, which is the U.S. society that governs things like SPECT scans, put out the new procedure guidelines. No, they're not out yet. This is where they send them out and everybody gets to comment on them. And they put back in traumatic brain injury, dementia, which had been taken out for inexplicable reasons, and infectious disease. In other words, diagnosing Lyme disease. In fact, the only reference they offer is diagnosing Lyme disease, ignoring, of course, our papers. But, you know, 2 of our papers were cited, 2 of the papers that I had done with Cyrus Raji and Daniel Amen and Phil Cohen and other great researchers and clinicians in the field. So that is a crack in the wall that has been put up around SPECT scans. And, my frustration is I was the guy saying to Eamon, you don't know that you're right. You can't prove it because you haven't done the research. We went in, we did the research.
Yeah.
And, Daniel Eamon and I did several papers together. And he's got this huge database. So there's tons more papers that could be done. And we've done the research. So we have established the facts. Yeah. And medical community refuses to look at them. Neurology, it's like, oh, no, nothing to see here. Psychiatry, why look at the organ that we're treating? That would imply that we didn't just know what we are doing because we got a guidebook that says, depression, let's go with Prozac. Anxiety, that's Lexapro.
Yeah.
By the way, SSRIs don't do anything for depression or anxiety. I mean, they're a waste of time.
Oh, I couldn't tell you how many. And I mean, my mom will never listen to this, bless her heart, but she's a nurse. And my whole life growing up was what medication could change, what's something about me that she could change with some medication. I was like literally a lab rat, I feel like. And, now that I'm govern my own body and have all of the access and everything, wow, I see and can understand the effects that all of those misdiagnosed things, and the same thing, bipolars, and depressions or anxiety, and the number of, and not for even the right reasons, birth control that I was on for managing more moods than anything. And it was this constant list of what we could do, and now I'm just like, wow, I ground myself and drink tea and meditate, and wow, I found all of these amazing things that I can just do on my own. I put my hands in the dirt and get connected, and it's just so much different now. But it gives me, luckily, the perception and the experience to not put my own children through that same process, and to be a little bit more naturalistic in the way I approach things, and more but yeah, I kind of understand that, let's just throw everything at it but not look at it. We'll just put blindfold on and throw things. Interesting.
There's this really interesting sort of holistic approach that it's actually gaining ground. So I was just at a conference, the Neuron Well conference in the Czech Republic. And so there are people from all over Europe, as well as a few of us from the US in attendance. And what the Neuron Well program is working on doing is developing a center outside of Prague. And, he took us to the facility. It's this huge facility with extensive grounds, swimming pool, horse arenas. And he's looking at bringing in, multi-watt infrared light therapy that I introduced briefly, transcranial magnetic stimulation. So working with things like the ExoMind, horse therapy, aqua therapy, all of the interpersonal therapies, as well as eventually creating living arrangements so that there's group housing and people can live, have a store that they can go to and shop and learn skills. And his idea is that this would be sort of this intensive 2-month experience where they would try to move the needle. And one of the fascinating things is what they're doing with stem cells in Europe. I mean, it's way different from what we're able to do here in the U.S. And so that was really exciting. There was a group there from Kiev, and I was talking with them because one of the things I want to do is get into Ukraine once the fighting stops and start treating all these folks who have traumatic brain injuries and concussion and PTSD and horrible grief from everyone's lost a loved one there. So it was an exciting conference, but I was talking about this holistic thinking, but everyone else was thinking holistically as well. So I really felt like I was, wow, I found my niche.
Yes. And that's so nice when you can have that conversation and it's not looked at as, something they want to hide behind any excuse to get out of the conversation.
Right, right.
Yeah, I'm really glad to know that there are groups of people like you that are getting together and making these, decisions. Tell us a little bit about ExoMind and what that
Sure.
means and what that does.
Yeah, yeah. So, I've stood by and watched TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, for years. So, just to explain TMS to your listeners in case they're not familiar. So, what it involves is putting a magnet fairly close to your head and running a signal through the magnet. So, turning on the magnet. Now, when you turn on a magnet, you actually create an electrical field that's perpendicular to the magnetic field. So the electrical field's going, in and out of the head. So you're creating an electrical current in the brain. This is like, shock therapy, but without the shock.
Mm-hmm.
And so TMS was initially developed as a way to map the brain. And now it's used to treat depression and things like this. However, when I look at all the data, the chance that you'd get better from depression was 50-50. I wasn't thrilled with 50-50. I was waiting for the next generation. And the next generation is ExoMind. Rather than having a 1.2 Tesla magnet, this is a 3.6 Tesla magnet. So it's literally kind of the magnetic field of an MRI. So it's very powerful. And they revolutionized sort of the inner workings. I won't go into it. So the treatments are much shorter, and you need much fewer treatments to get the benefit. So this is a hugely powerful technique. There are very few of these machines in the US. It's a company out of the Czech Republic. I literally went to the headquarters where they build these things. And it's like going through a Ferrari the Ferrari manufacturing plant, where like a team builds the car from the frame up. One team, one car. And so they're responsible for everything about that car, and the care and attention that they put into these. I was just blown away.
Wow. And I mean, maybe a question I have and my listeners might have, can any of these things damage you rather than help you?
Great question. Yeah, that's a really important question. I mean, it's always the first thing to look at is, safety. So, in the case of TMS, even with, a more powerful magnet, there is very little evidence of like long-term, brain damage or anything like that. Now, with the old machines, they are very noisy. So people would get tinnitus, they'd get earaches, they'd get headaches. This machine sounds like this. That's it.
Like an MRI.
Right. So, well, no, I mean, MRI is just like being in a mosh pit.
Yeah.
But so, my technologists, have to train, and they had to treat me before they treat any of my patients. I am their guinea pig. They had to do that 5 times with me before I let them touch a patient. So, I've had, a whole bunch of ExoMind treatments. And, it's what's the word I want to use? It's sort of like, getting, when you wake up in the morning, you're kind of groggy and you have that first cup of coffee or that first cup of tea. And then you kind of wake up and it's that sort of feeling. It's like, wow, okay, things are kind of a little brighter. I can think more clearly. So it's remarkable in that way. So with the ExoMind, there's not the headaches, there's not the earaches, there's not the, loud noises. So it's much more comfortable. It takes 24 minutes. So it's easier to do. And, the number of treatments you need is not 40, it's 6. So it's remarkably different. Now, in the case of infrared light, there are these low power devices that you can buy and you can take home, and they're low power because you can take them home.
Yeah.
Our device is strong enough that, I mean, if I held it, on a piece of fabric for a while, I could burn a hole through the fabric. Let's be honest. We don't do that, right?
Yes.
So, again, my technologists are trained, and, we know how to keep it moving such that we don't raise the temperature. And we literally used to follow the emitter around with a digital thermometer, checking ourselves until we made sure we had that rhythm down.
Wow.
So we know how to do this in a way that doesn't cause any discomfort or harm. It is a powerful antidepressant. So if you are a bipolar patient and we give you a powerful antidepressant, you can get a little hypomanic. And so, one of the things I always do then is I have a special protocol for folks who are on the bipolar spectrum. But what we're seeing with autism, with this more powerful infrared light, is reduction in anxiety. I have yet to meet someone on the spectrum who did not have anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? So a reduction in the anxiety and a reduction in that sort of cognitive rigidity. So I'll give you one great example. This young man, he's in his mid-20s now, and he's hooked on social media, and he gets very upset when somebody, blocks him on whatever they're on. And he takes it very personally, and he would escalate himself to the point that he's saying, call the police, have them come shoot me. I mean, just horrifying level of agitation. And now, he says, man, I'm really upset about that. And that's it. He doesn't spiral up. He doesn't perseverate. He doesn't get stuck like he used to. So that's the kinds of things that we're seeing for folks who are on the autism spectrum. But this modality, we're treating Parkinson's patients. We're treating patients with dementia. We're treating long COVID patients, and they get better, and they're 100% better. Go home. Depression, PTSD. Yeah.
I mean, we can heal from so many things. And I think that the more we offer resources and opportunities like this for people to learn about things and share with their families and hopefully others, then it will start having an effect on our communities. And that's the most important part of all.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're healthier in our brains and our minds, and we have children, then we're being an example of better living and better humaning for our children. And, I think that it's going to be just this wonderful, hopefully, come together of everything and raise the vibrations, and everybody started getting their brain done. No, just joking. It's great. It's a great resource to have. Where can people go to find out more about this and maybe your papers, or do you have your own website where people can find out more?
Website? What's a website?
Right?
No, www.healmybrain.info. So www.healmybrain.info. That will take you to the Neuroluminance website. Neuroluminance is the clinic company. There you go, healmybrain.info. And it's a lot easier to spell than neuroluminance. Now, there are, case examples on there, and there's some of the science on there, and some of the science about the exomind is on there. And one of the fascinating things here is I have 5 patents and 2 patents pending. One of the patents is on the combination of infrared light and ketamine. Now, we've not talked about ketamine, but just very quickly, ketamine turns on neuroplasticity by a different mechanism. So putting infrared light neuroplasticity and ketamine neuroplasticity together, you get 1 + 1 = 3, which is really cool. So synergy. Now, one of the things that we know is that the exomind turns on neuroplasticity by a voltage-gated calcium channel pathway, a third mechanism. So potentially infrared light plus TMS can have that same kind of synergy. And so that's one of the areas that I'm really studying and paying attention to and thinking about here as we're moving forward over the next year or so. And I think that, we're going to see that, synergy is something that's going to become a part of how we think about treating any disorder. And, I do that already in pharmacology. In autism, I'm not using SSRIs and risperidone. I'm using medicines people haven't even heard of, doxycycline, and maybe some they have, guanfacine. I'm things like oxcarbazepine, trileptal. And, so I'm adding in things that work on mechanisms within the brain rather than just, putting a pharmacological straitjacket on the brain.
Yes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I think that's fascinating. And I had something, but I'm a good listener, so I lost it while I was listening. That's a good thing. But yeah. Oh, that's what it is. That's what it was. Is that I just thought it was so fascinating when you were talking about ketamine, because I really don't know much about it. And the only experience I've ever had is my poor child, and she broke her leg on a trampoline once. It was actually 4 or 5 years ago, just a couple days ago, like the anniversary of it.
Yeah.
And when they had administered it to her, the amount of information that started coming out of her mouth was like, what? And we know our son has a photographic memory. We've had that measured, and he has uses 99% of his working memory. We'll have to talk about him another time. You'd be fascinated with his brain. I'd love to get him in your hands. But she always, liked dinosaurs and all of these things when she was little. But when they administered it literally play by play told us every scene from Camp Cretaceous and every dinosaur that was in it, every actor's name, she literally told us the entire series. And the doctors, and everyone was just like, oh my gosh, because she was maybe 8. And but yeah, so that's really fascinating that I can see, and I can see with many years ago, I had given my son come on, brain. What is it? The DHA? Is that what it is in vitamins?
Yeah.
A vitamin. I had given him a vitamin with that in it, anyways, and he was so violent. It was triggered this crazy violent, and I'd never seen it. He was like this gentle person, and of course I took it. It was like a one-time thing, and it never happened again. It's just fascinating how much we don't know, and how much we, I guess I am very curious, and I want to be more curious and learn and know more. I hope everybody else does too. So feel sad for those who don't.
Well, if you want to learn more about ketamine, I'd say I got to remember I'm backwards here, is Brighter Days Ahead is my book. And I use ketamine as a model for neuroplasticity-based treatments. And so I get way down into the weeds about how how ketamine works and what ketamine is and what S-ketamine is, Bravado, and the dirty little secrets about all that. But it's filled with anecdotes of patients and their experiences, as well as, my own experience. Because, I had a colleague who said, how can you give this stuff to patients if you don't know what it feels like? I said, okay, well, that's fair enough. After her badgering me for a year about it, I said, okay, let's go ahead and try it. And so I described sort of my experience, which was absolutely beautiful, and probably one of my cherished memories, because I got to relive this very special moment in my life, the first day I held my adopted child. And my youngest adopted child. I have 2.
I love that.
And, so it was just this beautiful experience that I got to relive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to learn more about it. And is it on Audible by any chance?
It's not audio.
Okay.
Again, it's self-published on Amazon. So it's like, okay, do I really want to read this entire book?
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. Oh my gosh. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today. It's wonderful conversation, and I'd love to invite you back again to dive deeper and talk about more things, and
Sure.
anything you might be working on that comes up and you want to let me know about, and we can, kind of promote or display that. And we'd love to do that too. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was a really great conversation, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Great.
Shining bright, oh yeah, stories of love and courage all throughout the night. Her voice resonating, an anthem for all through the trials and the trials. She answers the call, a mother and a fighter, breaking barriers in stride. With love as her guide, she'll never hide. She's changing the world for you, with a heart that's fierce and strong, empathy's a melody. Journey we all belong. Followers gather like stars in the night, so bright. 44,000 voices sharing in the light. She stands for family, advocates for more, a movement of compassion, ways will soar. Podcast together is a symphony of support, creating life, changing rapport. She's changing the world for you, a heart that's fierce and strong, empathy's a melody.